Hey, greetings, everyone, and welcome to Making Sales Social Live. I'm Bob Woods, and with me today, as always, is the LinkedIn Whisperer, Brynne Tillman. How you doing today, Brynne?
Good, Bob. How are you?
I am doing great, and I am really excited about today's topic.
Welcome to Making Sales Social Live, as we share LinkedIn and social selling training, strategies, and tips that will have an immediate impact on your business. Join Brynne Tillman and me, Bob Woods, every week. Making Sales Social Live.
Because it's something that we normally don't discuss, and there's a lot of stuff that's like literally currently going on right now with this, and we always like to talk about topical things. So that's one of the reasons why I'm so excited to talk about what to share as LinkedIn content. So up until recently, the types of content members have shared has largely been business oriented. If you've been on LinkedIn long enough, you definitely know that. Lately, though, some on LinkedIn have been going in a different direction towards the type of content you might see on, say, Facebook. So that's led some on and off the platform to discuss whether this Facebookification of LinkedIn, and I'm glad I said that like right the first time, because that's incredibly hard to pronounce, Facebookification, if that's a good thing. So as you'd expect, some say yes, while others are mystified and even a little honked off by this shift. So when you toss in the influence of TikTok into the mix, which is huger and just getting bigger and bigger every day, the result has been much more varied types of content that I think it's pretty safe to say LinkedIn has never seen on its platform before. Overall, I do think there's no black or white going on here. What we have is a lot of gray. And of course, the ultimate decision on your content is up to you. With that, Brynne, we've got a little bit of a daunting task ahead of us today, but I'm definitely looking forward to it. So let's get right into it.
Yeah, I love this topic. And I would say my answer might have been different 3 years ago than it is today. Yeah. So I love that you started this out with it's a little bit gray. But what I want to start with from my perspective is we need to make sure we know what our objective is. What is our goal with LinkedIn? My goal with Facebook is extremely different than my goal with LinkedIn. With Facebook, I'm connecting with my friends and my family. I want to see my granddaughter pictures. I want to see my friends' kids' pictures, right? My goal is very, very personal. My goal on LinkedIn is to connect with professionals, very much like if I were to go to a Chamber of Commerce meeting. My goal is to meet lots of people where we have some professional connection. But when you think about it, when you go to these Chambers of Commerce meeting, you are not 100% talking about business. You are getting to know them as human beings, one-on-one. And so when I sat back, when we decided last week that this was going to be our title, our topic today, I said, I really want to think about my position on personal, professional, and really it's this hybrid. But you don't want to be an oversharer. There are so many people on LinkedIn that I believe are oversharing. It's too personal. The way I look at it is if you would not have a conversation with a networking partner, if you were out at a chamber event or at a business card exchange, if you would not tell them the story, don't post the story, right? See, that's we'll look at it like, what do we want our professional network to know about us? Now, the other thing is we don't want to be in such a personal conversation world where we may be making connections, but there's no connection to your purpose for being on LinkedIn. So my purpose for being on LinkedIn is to meet other professionals, learn from them, share some insights, build a network, and ultimately grow a business. Also found vendors that helped us grow our business, right? So this ecosystem of business where some personal is important, right? So I think when we come from that perspective, but there's a saying that we live by, which is lead to your solution, not with your solution. So the over professional is very dangerous too. The over constantly pitching and sharing, how we help people, that's as dangerous as oversharing personally. So I think that fine line is important. And I'm going to throw in one more thing, and I'm going to ask you a question. One more piece around this professional, personal piece is have a little fun too. Like, make sure your personality is coming through, even if you're not sharing like really deeply personal things. You can make it personal by letting your personality show. Video is a great way to do this. But for example, I hopped on a Zoom call for a vendor the other day, and it said meeting starts December 31st, 1979 at 7 p.m. Right? That has nothing to do with my business. That is not, but I thought it was funny. So I put out a little post that said I was late for a meeting, and I got a lot of engagement, right? So it was funny. It was more personal than, hey, let me give you tips on social selling. And although I want to bring lots of value, there's bringing in a normal conversation connection as well. But I want to ask you, as we share this personal stuff and this professional stuff and this hybrid of stuff, how does that affect engagement in the algorithm? What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, so with the algorithm, right now it's because so many people are doing this. I do think that they are discovering some kind of benefit from it. So they are getting probably more views and more likes and probably more comments. So if you're on there, just if you're on LinkedIn just for that, it might be working for you. But when it comes to what we believe, having a goal, having a purpose to be specifically on LinkedIn, I think that it probably fails because you're more than likely, I should say, not meeting those goals. So if you're depending on the LinkedIn algorithm alone to get your stuff out, you're somewhat depending on what I call magic, basically, especially because we have an idea of what the LinkedIn algorithm does. We're not really sure what the LinkedIn algorithm does. And if you want to read a really good story that for our live listeners just came out today, go to Axios and look up Sunset of the Social Network. Even though LinkedIn isn't mentioned in this article, you can put LinkedIn right in there as well. So it's basically all of these social platforms lessening your actual social network and just putting in more algorithm-based content into your feeds. And LinkedIn is definitely doing that to an extent as well. It's a really fascinating article. But anyhow, that's why we believe in much more targeted sharing and, of course, keeping your goals in mind there. So a lot of times that's what we call getting content into the LinkedIn inbox. So via messaging, in other words, you can still do that algorithm stuff. And that's nice. And obviously, as Brynne said, be personable while you're being professional. I'm kind of a funny guy, I like to think, anyhow. So even when I share that business stuff, a lot of that does have my humor in it, and I'm hoping that at least a quarter of the people find it funny when I do that type of thing. And there are times when I do share maybe a little bit more personal stuff, but I always try to tie that back in to my professional goal of being on there. So in other words, I'm not sharing purely personal stuff that has nothing to do with business. Like, for example, my Facebook is tightly locked down. If you're not a friend of mine, you can't get in. That's because that's the purely personal side of me. Now, I just got over COVID like last week, and I had a little bit longer. So I shared about COVID and everything else and what I was going through on Facebook. I would never do that on LinkedIn. In fact, most people, if they're connected with me right now, probably go, "Oh, I had no idea you had COVID." There's a reason for that, because if anything, it knocked me out of doing business for a little while. So, I think that you think about that type of thing while you're sharing, keeping your personal goals in mind, and no matter what you're sharing, even if it is a little more personal, having that goal in mind, I think can make you much more of a success on LinkedIn while you're still getting a little more personal. Because just like Brynne said, you are a person even when you're out there personally networking. You do have your own stories. You do have your own point of view. It's not a bad thing to share those. You're not a robot. But you do have to worry about the oversharing thing.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I want to see kind of what the folks are saying. I skipped the great majority of personal posts. So let's think about this for a moment. We want to make sure that that personal post in some way would bring value to the reader as well. Or even if the value is a giggle, but we want to make sure, right, that we're not sharing our purposes of we just want to tell everyone what we want to tell them. Make sure their content that we are sharing is something that they'd be interested in reading. This LinkedIn user says, I've stayed away from personal posts. So I have mostly stayed away from personal posts. I will say one of the 3 top posts I've ever made was my 10-year anniversary of breast cancer survival. It was very personal, but it was also, I talked about how that really created my vision of business and how I wanted to bring what I learned into the company. And so I don't do a lot of personal things, but every once in a while I'll put one in. I hit a milestone, a few milestones along the way that I'll share that are personal, but I'll always bring it back to my goal, which is networking with other professionals. So here's another one. Teresa Merrill says, nope, it's inappropriate and changing the dynamics of the platform. So, that would have been my answer 3 years ago. 100% would have said, this is a professional network. Again, there are oversharers. I overshare on Facebook. It's expected. There are oversharers on LinkedIn that really, I agree, changes the dynamic of the platform. And for people that are only sharing personal stuff, that changes the dynamic. But I do believe that there is a place for personal, from a professional perspective. Stephen Farber, I connect better with someone on a personal note than I ever would on what their business could do for me. I've bought from people simply because they were transparent about something in their life, aka people love to see personality. People do. And the whole thing is people buy from people, not from companies. That's a little bit of that personality coming out for sure. So Bob Sidbeck says, I find it inappropriate if your goal is to establish business relationships. Are you only going to extend that to those believing as you do? Yeah, like this is, and again, Bob opened this up with, you are going to choose the way you share content, the way that it makes most sense for you. I would have said 3 years ago that 99.9% of your content needs to be business oriented. But I'm okay now. Like I'm especially post-pandemic when we were all shut down. And it's not even post-pandemic, post-shutdown, where, we were all looking for the humanness in people. Now, when I've connected with people on a business level, I like to get to know them personally. There just really has to be a very good balance. And again, you've got to get into the eyes of the beholder, the content recipient, right? The person that's consuming what you've put out there. And is this relevant to them? Does it enlighten them? Does it teach them a lesson or give them hope or do something that's meaningful? And, ultimately, it's not about you and telling your story. It's about connecting with other people and even asking their story, right? There are some, for example, there's a poll from months ago that got thousands and thousands of votes that talked about how important is your why in business, and tell us in comments your why. Your why is the personal side of business. Totally appropriate.
But it is your business too at the same time. I mean, that's one of those intersections of personal and professional that I was talking about before that I think, it doesn't promote you, quote unquote, necessarily, but it does show the type of person that you are while you're discussing business at the same time. So that gives people additional insight, not only into your business, but who you are and how you conduct that. I think that those types of posts are great.
Yeah, I'd love to know who this LinkedIn user is. You have your settings so we can't see your name, but since the focus on bringing creators to the platform, the feed has become so cluttered with noise and stuff that it's clickbait virtue content. There is a lot of that now. Closer examination of the profiles engaging with this type of content is suspect fake profiles. I don't know about the fake profile stuff. I mean, there might be some, but here's the thing that I highly recommend highly, highly recommend is use the bell feature. So if you are connected to someone on their profile, you'll see a bell, or if you follow someone so if you don't see the bell, follow them, and then you'll see the bell. And then you can select what content goes into your notifications. It has a big difference.
Yeah, it's a good way to get notified about the people who you want to see actually post. That's a great thing that LinkedIn did.
Yeah. So attach your personal information to your profile, my view. Sometimes too much personal information will make some important information disappear and unnoticed. I agreed. The other thing is, like, I think there's a level of vulnerability that's great, but then there's a level of vulnerability that makes you look weak. And you want to make sure, like, here's an example. Someone, and this was again years ago, that was, kind of in our circle, had a serious nervous breakdown. It was a postpartum depression breakdown, talked about it a lot on LinkedIn, and then ultimately lost a lot of the following because people lost confidence. Right. And so just be careful. I love vulnerability, but vulnerability to the point of that you're losing, that other people's confidence in your competence can be a problem and a challenge as well. So that's great. So at least we could give a break from telling people to wake up before 6 a.m. and take a cold shower. We have seen enough. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Well, I think that what Hussam is getting into a little bit more is some people are actually trying to fashion themselves a little bit as LinkedIn influencers without, being an actual influencer in the influencer program. But you know how, you got TikTok influencers and Instagram influencers. I do see some people on LinkedIn actually going that direction and wanting to become more of a business influencer. And I don't think it's working. Hussam
It's
obviously
not the
doesn't
right
think it's working.
platform.
It's not the right platform for it. I would agree wholeheartedly. Sharon is next. I've got it in there. I see all these videos that are funny or inspiring that have tons and views and shares on them. What about those? You could do funny videos, but you can educate at the same time while you're doing those funny videos. In fact, you actually see that a lot more on TikTok. LinkedIn is kind of encouraging crossover between LinkedIn and TikTok because there are educators on TikTok who do videos on TikTok that I think are appropriate for LinkedIn, but they're more funny, they're more engaging, they're more personal, not personal, but personable.
Personality.
Personality, yeah, thank you. That's even a better word for it. And so I think that those types of videos, as long as they're bringing value, so that's what you got to be ultimately concerned about, is bringing value.
And so bringing value and in one way or another, attracting the right people to engage. Because here's the thing, if you're using this from a business development or a social selling perspective, we can, like, I could put out a post and I could get hundreds or thousands of engagement from IT specialists, but that's not who I sell to. Or I could get, right. So part of it is, am I attracting the right people that helps me get to the right goal? So this becomes like the challenge of, are we posting for likes and comments, or are we posting for engagement from the right people? This all goes back to, what's your goal? What's your objective? Right.
Yep.
So if your objective is, I want lots of likes and comments, great. If your objective is, I want more targeted followers and engagers, then we have to make sure we're doing that. Balance it. Yep. It should mostly be professional. Yep. And some mild personal. I do like to see how we are the same and went through how we're the same and we've gone through the same thing. That relating is what creates relationships, when we can relate with other people. So that's awesome. I love that.
So the one thing that I wasn't sure that we were going to get into, I actually wanted someone from the audience to bring this up because I didn't want to sound preachy. No religious or political posts that crosses a line. I would agree with that. Whenever I see a political post, I click on the three dots and I click on whatever is called hide this post, and they ask you why, you put political. I do not do that on LinkedIn. I do think that crosses the line as well.
And plus 50% of your future clients believe differently than you do, and 50% agree.
Yep.
So like the moment you do this, you isolate opportunities. And unless you are running for office, it should not be there for sure.
Mhm.
Okay. Oh, go ahead. We have a measure of control over our posts, but not reacting. And by clicking on the 3 dots and saying, I don't want to see this, what are your thoughts?
That's
So
just what I mentioned.
yeah.
Yep.
Also,
Yeah,
do you
just
still
mentioned
get
that.
the person's content? So you can be connected to someone and unfollow them. And I have
Mhm.
done that a lot. There are people I care about that I'm okay, but I don't want to see their stuff because it's so personal. There is an influencer where 99.9% of her stuff is personal. And it makes me nuts, but I don't want to disconnect from her. I just
Yeah.
don't want to see the stuff, right? Like she went viral on LinkedIn, and what city do you think I'm moving to? Right? Like stuff that does, yeah, right? But
What?
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So yeah, but those are the things. But I still like, she has an enormous following. People love her, but all of her content is around like stuff like that. But
Yeah.
she gets engagement. So again, you get to choose. I just unfollow so I don't have to see it. Doesn't mean I'm
Yeah.
not connected to her.
So this is one that I've seen a little bit of, but this is interesting. So this LinkedIn user says the stuff clogging the feed are stories that people are posting that aren't even about themselves. And I have seen this, and it's showing in my feed because someone in my second degree, first or second degree, engaged with it. And they'll even credit the original person at the end of the post. I do think that this is just clickbait and just people trying to get
Not
people
always.
on to see more. And yeah,
So I disagree. I love
you
that we
do?
have.
Okay.
I totally
Yeah.
disagree.
Okay.
And
Okay.
that's okay. And I
That
love
no,
that. I love that we have
we
different
do
perspectives.
disagree behind closed doors too. So I mean, it's not like we're completely simpatico
No,
on
I
everything,
mean,
but we
I
listen.
love this because also this is telling you guys you could disagree with us, you could disagree with each other, and we can still
Yeah,
love each
exactly.
other. But I like not so much of what I find is Bob liked this post, and if Bob liked it, I might like it, and I start to find content. Then I can reach out to Bob and say, "Hey, Bob, I really loved you came up in my feed as having liked this piece of content. I really enjoyed it. I'd love to learn a little bit more about what you're following and who you're going." So I love seeing who liked it. The other thing is our
Well, this
content
isn't
goes
it
viral.
though. This is people who are borrowing entire stories from someone else and posting it on their feed, even though it has nothing to do with the person who's posting it.
Oh,
So
wait, I
they're
misunderstood.
basically
Maybe I
listing
agree
content.
100%. So you mean they're copying text and pasting it?
They are copying, maybe not word for word, but they are copying and sharing other people's stories. Now, a lot of
Not
times,
sharing the
like this,
original post.
no, but they're posting it as their own, but they're publishing it.
Okay, I agree
Yeah,
with you 100%. I agree with the LinkedIn user. I misunderstood. If you
yeah.
share it with your own perspective, your own text, that's great. If you are publishing it, that you copy the text and post it with just a little at the end, oh my gosh, I was totally wrong. Bob, I 100% agree with you and the LinkedIn user.
So the next one, like the idea that will this provide value to user ratio like 95% business and 5 personal? Yeah, definitely. I mean, Brynne shared that one purely personal funny thing about the Zoom date thing. I think as long as you do that every just once in a while, you're fine. If you're doing it as a large part of your content strategy, maybe not so much.
Yeah, like mine was in real time, right? Like it
Yeah,
happened, it was funny, I wanted
yeah,
to share it. It wasn't personal, but it was not
yeah. Yeah, it wasn't
professional.
personal.
It
Yeah,
was like,
right.
it doesn't lead to my solution. It doesn't
Yeah,
get you to go, "Oh, she's
mhm,
brilliant at LinkedIn." It was
yeah.
just a
It was
little
just funny.
fun.
It
It
was
was
funny.
funny. And
That's it.
it was 5 hours to the 80s. It was December 31st, 1979. I love
That's
the
right.
80s.
That's funny. We are both 80s kids. That's for
That
sure.
is true.
So, what kinds of personal information would be okay to post? Now that's
It
yeah,
depends, right? So it like I would, there are people that share when you have to put their dog down and it's devastating. I
yeah.
wouldn't do that on
I
LinkedIn.
wouldn't do that either.
But I would do it on Facebook.
Yeah, I would do that 100%. I've unfortunately had to do that on Facebook, but stuff like that, stuff like my COVID thing that I just said, I did
Right.
not post that on LinkedIn, but I did post it on Facebook.
And go back to, if I were standing in a networking meeting, is this a conversation that I'd have? Right? Is this
Yeah.
something that I'd have with someone?
And that's different from person to person. We can't just say yes, no to everyone. That's just it's a highly personal thing. Pardon the pun or whatever you want to say there. Neil asks, what do you say to people who say the personal is the professional?
Well, what are they selling? Like yeah.
Context is probably needed there. I don't think that there's a pat answer to that.
I mean, I think on LinkedIn, we sell us, right? You buy Bob, you buy Brynne. Even though whatever it is, but that we have an enormous amount of competition in a sense out there, but people work with us because they connect with us because their personalities jive. Like Bob and I have been like working together, I think probably 8 years at this point, right? That we've been working together because we jive, right? Like there are personalities and there are personalities that we wouldn't. So, you've got to find that having a little personality come out is a good way to attract the right people that will jive with you. But I don't understand the personal is the professional. The person, it's the same person, but when I go to a chamber meeting, it's very different than when I go out to sushi with my girlfriends, which is very different when I go on a double date with my husband and another couple, which is different than when I take my daughter and my grandbaby out to lunch, right? Like it doesn't make me, I'm not being inauthentic. I just show up differently based on the audience I'm with. For example, I'm going to share this right now. I never curse professionally. I
don't
never curse. But at home, right?
Taylor.
So does that make it inauthentic? No. It's just how I choose to show up in different places. So personal is about me, professional is about we. Oh, I love that.
I love that. It's another t-shirt one. This is probably the longest.
It is long. We're over a half hour
that we've ever done. Yeah. So if we missed your comment, I apologize, but I think that the old clock on the wall, as the old thing says, probably is telling us that we should go ahead and wrap this up. So first of all, before I go into the standard script, this was a fantastic one. We loved all of the comments. We try to get the comments as much as we can. This one was just a blitz of comments. So again, apologize if we missed yours. And thanks again for joining us here on Making Sales Social Live. If you're with us live on LinkedIn right now, bless you, YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter, because we go out to all those places too. We go and do this every week, so keep an eye out for our live sessions. Now, if you're listening to us on our podcast, so it's recorded in other words, and you haven't subscribed already, just go ahead and subscribe to us. We'd appreciate it. If you want more information about our podcast, go to socialsaleslink.com/podcast. Easy as pie to do. And remember, when you're out and about, always make sure to make your sales
social.
Excellent. Thanks you again, everybody. We really appreciate this.
Thanks you again too, Bob.
Hit subscribe now and click the notification bell to get the latest videos from Social Sales Link. Give this video a like and comment down below. Register for free resources at linkedinlibrary.com.